Dean Martin was the man everyone wished they could be: effortless charm, a velvet voice, and that legendary king of cool smile that made the world believe he had life mastered. But behind the tuxedo, the jokes, and the easy swagger was a story far darker than Hollywood ever let on. His rise from a stammering working-class kid to global icon came at a price few ever understood. Because Dean didn't just battle critics and career pressures, he endured a lifetime of heartbreak, a complicated love life that never found peace, a son's tragic death that shattered him beyond repair. And in the end, the loss of his beloved wife left him wandering through his final years like a candle without a flame. We thought we knew Dean Martin. We were wrong. This is the devastating truth behind the awful ending and tragic deaths that marked the final chapter of the King of Cool's life. A story far more heartbreaking than the legend ever revealed. Dean Martin didn't begin life as the legend we remember. He was born Dino Paul Crocetti on June 7, 1917, in Steubenville, Ohio, the son of Italian immigrants. His family spoke only Italian at home, so Dino didn't learn English until he was 5. School was a struggle. He was bullied for his accent, felt out of place, and eventually dropped out in the 10th grade. Years later, he joked, "I was too smart for those teachers, may I?" But the truth was simple. He never fit into the classroom. After leaving school, Dino bounced from job to job: gas station attendant, milkman, drugstore clerk. None of it excited him. What did catch his attention was boxing. Under the name Kid Crochet, he fought 12 matches and won only one. Along the way, he collected a broken nose, split lip, and busted knuckles. It didn't take long for him to realize this wasn't a future he wanted. While living in New York with fellow entertainer Sonny King, the two were so broke they turned their apartment into an underground fight club, charging people to watch them box until someone hit the floor. Dino even knocked Sonny out once in a real match. The money helped, but the bruises told a clearer story. He needed a different path. That path began in the most unlikely place: an illegal casino behind a tobacco shop where Dino worked as a blackjack dealer. In the haze of smoke and whispered bets, he started singing to pass the time. His smooth, easy voice caught the attention of band leader Ernie McKay, who invited him to perform. Dino agreed, adopting the stage name Dino Martini, and stepped onto nightclub stages across Ohio. By 1938, Dino's voice had carried him far enough to join bandleader Sammy Watkins. Watkins took him on tour and offered one piece of advice that changed everything. "Kid, you need a better name. Try Dean Martin." Dino listened, and Dean Martin was born. By 1943, he was living in New York, performing full-time and working tirelessly to make people notice him. He wasn't just crafting a career, he was shaping a persona. Slowly, the world began to recognize the smooth, effortless charm that would one day define him. As Dean's fame grew, so did the act that made audiences adore him. He'd stroll onto the stage with a whiskey glass in hand, looking relaxed, funny, and unbothered. The image wasn't entirely his invention. He borrowed the style from performer Phil Harris, but Dean perfected it. He became the embodiment of cool. Yet behind the swagger was a very different man. Dean was naturally shy and uncomfortable in crowds. In a rare 1967 interview, he admitted, "People thought I was stuck up, but I just didn't know what to say. I never spoke good English." The insecurity that followed him from childhood never really left. On stage, he was confident, charming, and quick with a joke. Offstage, he was quiet, private, and often unsure of himself. That contrast, cool on the outside, cautious within, became one of the defining truths of Dean Martin's life. Dean Martin's career changed dramatically in August 1944 when he crossed paths with a young comedian named Jerry Lewis at New York's Belmont Plaza Hotel. Dean was performing at the Glass Hat Club when he spotted Jerry and casually told him, "You're a funny kid." That simple compliment sparked a partnership that would shape both of their lives for the next decade. They clicked instantly and soon blended their acts into one chaotic, fast-paced team. Their first show together at the 500 Club in Atlantic City on July 24, 1946, was a disaster. So bad the owner threatened to fire them. Desperate, they ran into the alley and improvised a new routine. Jerry would barge in as a clumsy busboy, interrupting Dean's singing with dropped dishes and wild antics. Dean would fire back with jokes and bread rolls. The audience roared. Overnight, their act transformed from flop to sensation. Their energy, half slapstick, half improvisation, made them stars along the East Coast. Their big break came at New York's Copacabana, where their act exploded in popularity. By 1948, they were appearing on national TV on Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town, sharing the lineup with giants like Rodgers and Hammerstein. They even hired up-and-coming writers Norman Lear and Ed Simmons to sharpen their material. Hollywood followed quickly. In 1949, Paramount cast them in My Friend Irma, and their agent secured an unusually generous deal giving them creative freedom and the right to produce one film a year through their own company, York Productions. They kept full control of their club shows, radio work, and recordings, making them millionaires at a time when most performers signed away everything. Jerry later wrote, "Dean was one of the great comic geniuses of all time. Their bond was deep enough that Jerry stood as best man at Dean's wedding in 1949, a symbol of how strong their partnership had become. As the years passed, the laughter that once fueled Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis began to fade. Even though they were a massive success, cracks were forming. Critics complained their movies felt repetitive, and Dean grew frustrated with playing the same part over and over. He began putting less effort into an act that no longer felt like his. The tension came to a boiling point in 1954 during the filming of Three Ring Circus. Look magazine released a cover photo featuring Jerry Lewis and actress Cherie North, but Dean had been completely cut out. Humiliated, Dean marched onto the set, threw the magazine at their publicist Jack Keller, and unleashed his anger. Jerry noticed the shift too. One day, Dean told him bluntly, "Anytime you want to call it quits, just let me know." The fun was gone. Dean no longer felt like an equal partner. "Why should I come in on time?" he later said. "There's nothing for me to do." In Three Ring Circus, he didn't even sing until halfway through the film, and when he did, it was a recycled number performed to animals. What had once been magic now felt lopsided. Dean stayed professional until their contract ended, but on July 25, 1956, exactly 10 years after their first show together, he quietly walked away, ending one of the most iconic partnerships in show business. After splitting from Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin didn't slow down. He reinvented himself. He leaned into his singing and acting career, quickly becoming a major star in Las Vegas. There, he joined the iconic Rat Pack alongside Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. They were known for their wild nights, smoky lounges, and endless cocktails. But despite the image, Dean wasn't really like the rest of them. To the public, he looked like the biggest party animal of the group. Sinatra even joked, "He's got a tan because he found a bar with a skylight." But behind the scenes, Dean was usually the first to head home. He liked his own routine, and he didn't pretend to be something he wasn't. Comedian Tom Dreesen said Dean's quiet independence sometimes annoyed Sinatra, but eventually Frank respected him for it. Their friendship ran deep. Dean's daughter Diana once said you could see the love and respect between them every time they shared a stage. Dean's past also made him unshakable. Before fame, he had bootlegged liquor and fought bare-knuckle matches, so mob-connected crowds didn't scare him. While Sinatra had close ties to the mob, Dean stayed cool. After one show, mobsters tried thanking him for helping them out. Dean calmly replied, "I did it for Frank," and walked away. That moment summed him up perfectly. Fearless, blunt, and impossible to intimidate. Even Dean's famous boozy persona was just an act. On stage, he carried a whiskey glass, slurred his jokes, and played the lovable drunk. But it was apple juice in the glass. His backup singer Patty Gribo and even Jerry Lewis confirmed the truth. Dean's drinking was mostly a performance. "I drink about 1/10 as much as I pretend to," he once admitted. When NBC approached Dean Martin in the mid-1960s with his own variety show, he agreed, but only under his rules. He told them he would work 1 day a week, wouldn't rehearse, and wanted ownership of the show after its first broadcast. To everyone's surprise, NBC agreed, and Dean stuck to it. He never attended rehearsals. A stand-in went through the routines with the dancers and guest stars while Dean relaxed in his dressing room, sometimes watching on a monitor, unless there was a football game on. Yet when the cameras went live, he was flawless, calm, charming, and completely in control. The Dean Martin Show ran from 1965 to 1974, drawing more than 40 million viewers a week. Audiences believed his laid-back persona because it felt real. "It ain't nothing phony," he once said. "That's really me." Even Elvis admired him. Though Elvis famously clashed with singers like Sinatra, he deeply respected Dean and often performed "Everybody Loves Somebody," one of Dean's biggest hits. Off-stage, Dean had simple tastes. He never liked reading books. Black Beauty was the only one he ever finished. But he loved comic books. He stayed a lifelong Batman fan and was thrilled when he met the character's creator, Bob Kane. He even starred in his own comic series with Jerry Lewis, which ran for 40 issues. But behind the cool image was a man carrying heavy grief. In 1987, Dean's son, Dean Paul Martin, died in a plane crash. The loss shattered him. He withdrew from friends, including Sinatra, and even walked out on their reunion tour. Though they eventually reconciled, the pain never left. When Dean died, Sinatra said, "He was my brother, not by blood, but by choice." Despite decades of fame, hit TV shows, 85 film and TV credits, and more than 50 million records sold worldwide, Dean Martin stayed humble and private. His voice became part of American culture, his charm unmatched. But behind the smooth smile and effortless wit was a man who carried far more heartbreak than the world ever saw. Dean Martin married for the first time in 1941. His bride was Elizabeth Ann Betty McDonald, the woman who stood beside him during the uncertain early years of his career. They settled in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and quickly became parents. Craig arrived in 1941, followed by Claudia in 1944, Gail in 1945, and Diana in 1948. 4 children in 7 years. But the marriage didn't survive Dean's rising career and constant travel. In 1949, after 8 years together, they divorced. Dean was awarded custody of all 4 children, while Betty moved to the San Francisco area and kept a quiet life until her passing in 1989. Though their marriage ended early, she helped raise the first half of the family Dean would later be famous for, and their children remained close to him. Soon after the divorce, Dean's life took another dramatic turn. Just 1 week later, he married Jean Beager, a stunning model and former Orange Bowl queen. They met on New Year's Eve in Miami, and as Jean later recalled, "We locked eyes, and I knew." Together, they had 3 more children: Dean Paul Jr. in 1951, Ricci in 1953, and Gina in 1956, bringing Dean's total to 7 kids. Dean often joked about his growing clan, saying, "The 3 words you hear most around my house are, hello, goodbye, and I'm pregnant." From the outside, Dean and Jean lived the classic Hollywood dream. He became a superstar in music, film, and Vegas, and a central figure in the Rat Pack. They were one of the industry's most glamorous couples, but after 24 years of marriage, it ended. Jean announced their separation in 1969, and the divorce became final in 1972, filed by Dean himself, who quipped, "It's the gentlemanly thing to let the wife file, but I've never been a gentleman." Despite the split, their bond remained. Life and tragedy would bring them together again. In 1973, the same year Dean divorced Jean, he married again, this time to Catherine Hahn, a Beverly Hills salon receptionist. A family friend introduced them, and their whirlwind romance led to a star-studded wedding attended by Frank Sinatra himself. But despite the glamorous ceremony, the marriage didn't last. Dean and Catherine were together only 3 years, divorcing in 1976. They had no children together, but Dean adopted Catherine's daughter Sasha and treated her as his own. After that, Dean was done with marriage. Catherine would be his last wife. But following their split, something unexpected happened. Dean and Jean reconnected. They didn't remarry, but they grew close again, especially after the tragedy that shattered both of them. In 1987, their son, Dean Paul Martin Jr., died in a military jet crash at just 35. The loss devastated Dean. He withdrew from life, and many believed he never fully recovered. Jean supported him through the darkest period of his life, and the two remained close until Dean's death in 1995 from lung cancer complications. He died on Christmas Day. Jean never remarried and lived quietly in Beverly Hills until her own passing in 2016. That same year, their son Richie also died, adding another layer of heartbreak to their family story. But even as people saw Dean as a charming family man, his private life was more complicated. Years later, Sandra Lansky, the daughter of mobster Meyer Lansky, claimed in her memoir that she had an affair with Dean while he was married to John, even during John's pregnancy with Gina. She wrote about their nights together in vivid detail and described an unspoken rule between them: no personal questions, no emotional ties. To the public, Dean remained the cool, lovable star. As Lee Hale from The Dean Martin Show said, audiences believed he was a devoted husband and father, and the jokes about booze and women were just part of the act. But Sandra's revelation offered a different look at him, reminding the world that behind the charm, Dean Martin was human, flawed, and far more complicated than his easy smile suggested. He was never the same after his son's death. Dean Martin still looked calm and collected on the outside, but those who knew him could see the change immediately. Author William Keck wrote that Dean wasn't just grieving, he was living with a permanently broken heart. In his memoir, Keck recalled how Dean's final years were marked by quiet sadness. Dean would still crack jokes and smile, but the spark that once defined him was gone. He often told Keck, "I'll be back on that stage one day." Yet it was clear he no longer believed it himself. His desire to perform had simply disappeared. Friends noticed it too. Impressionist Rich Little put it bluntly. Once he lost his son, that was the end of him. According to Jerry Lewis, that was also when Dean truly began drinking heavily. The act stopped being an act. The pain slipped through. Dean withdrew from the spotlight, choosing silence over applause. The man who once lit up every room now wanted only to be left alone. By 1993, his health had begun to decline. Years of heavy smoking caught up with him, and he was diagnosed with lung cancer at Cedars-Sinai. Doctors recommended surgery, but Dean refused. In early 1995, he quietly retired from public life and stayed inside his Beverly Hills home. That Christmas morning, Dean Martin died of acute respiratory failure caused by emphysema. He was 78. Las Vegas dimmed its lights in his honor, a citywide farewell to the man who helped define its golden era. He was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. His crypt bears a simple line from his famous song, "Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime." At his private funeral, attended by Hollywood's elite, the room fell silent as Rosemary Clooney began singing that very song. No bright lights, no applause, Just a friend offering one last gentle goodbye to a legend who, in the end, was simply a father grieving a loss he could never overcome.